Welcome back into the Daily Dose. I'm your host, Jeff Hansen. As always, the show is brought to you by Give'emHellBrigham.com and by CougarSportsInsider.com, part of the 24/7 Sports Network. Thank you to those of you who have subscribed to the channel so far. If you haven't done so yet, please hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, like this video, leave a comment. All of those things help us out a bunch as we try to grow this new platform here on YouTube. So thank you for your support so far, and thank you for your continued support. Let's talk about another relationship of support. Let's talk about Built Bar and the BYU players. Let's kind of close the loop because it does seem like we have some closure on that story. Of course, a couple of weeks ago, Kevin Reynolds of the Salt Lake Tribune released a story saying that BYU players were not getting paid for their royalties on the Cougar Tail flavored Built Bar. Nick Greer responded, CEO of Built Bar, saying, "We were going to pay the players all along. The term was a year. We'll pay the players after the promo run or ends or expires." That was sometime during fall camp. In the name of doing the right thing, Nick Greer went ahead and paid the players right now. And then he went above and beyond and paid the players an additional $600 a player. That equated to another 15-20% of the Cougar Tail flavored bar sales. He went above and beyond. He did more than he had to do. Players are in an interesting situation right now. And I think that players are going to have to start paying attention to who they're taking advice from. Players got what they wanted, and they got more than what they were asking for from Built Bar. That's a good thing, right? They've got money in their pocket. It's easy to say, I won today. But what I think the players have done is I think that there's now some serious concerns about the future of the Built Bar relationship as it relates to BYU's NIL efforts. If I'm Nick Greer, the CEO of Built Bar, and I'm looking at the bad publicity I just got, I'm sitting here and wondering, is this even worth it? Is it worth it to continue to invest in BYU athletes? I think Nick Greer's loved the press so far. I think it's been a great relationship for Built and for BYU's players. But if things start to sour, what is he doing this for? He's got a company to run. He's not just doing this. He's not just a booster who's doing this for fun. He's doing this for a return for his company. I think the players I don't want to say their greed. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But I think players, in the name of anonymously complaining about a perceived slight that really looks more like a miscommunication, may have jeopardized the long-term relationship with Built. So great, you've got a little extra cash in your pocket today, but you're going to want that cash long-term. Those are some of the lessons that I think players are going to start to learn. This isn't just a BYU thing, but players are going to have to start to learn and evaluate across the country as it relates to these NIL deals. Now, we do need to talk a little bit about the report itself. Salt Lake Tribune released the report. They cited one player by name, Neil Pau'u, who wasn't even on the roster in 2022. He had graduated and moved on, was on the Buffalo Bills practice squad at that point. So I don't know why Kevin Reynolds made Neil Pau'u the voice of this movement, because Neil Pau'u really wasn't a part of it. The other players who were there were 5 anonymous players. And if you think about this, you start to break this down, I don't think that Kevin Reynolds was just randomly calling players. And I don't think that 5 players just randomly approached Kevin Reynolds all saying the same story. That doesn't happen in a vacuum. That feels like somebody was giving players advice. That feels like somebody was telling players, go to the media with these complaints and things will start to happen. And that feels like bad advice. That feels like short-sighted advice. And that feels like somebody who does not have the long-term interests of a player in mind. And I think we're starting to see some factions of that kind of bad advice trickle out across the country. Just this week, On3 Sports released a report saying that the College Football Players Association, which I didn't know existed in a formal sense, is recommending to players that they opt out of the new EA Sports College Football 2024 because the payout is only going to be $500 a player. Again, I think this is adults giving college football players really short-sighted and misguided advice. $500 a player for a right guard, the third string right guard on the roster, that's more than that player deserves. This is not salary, right? NIL is not about salary. NIL is about the value of your name, image, and likeness. And for the vast majority of college football players, their name, image, and likeness just isn't worth that much. From an EA Sports video game perspective, there are probably 5, maybe 10 players, and really you're maybe using maybe not even that many guys like Caleb Williams that actually move the needle, the guys who actually bring value and will help produce more sales of video games. Outside of those 5 or 10 guys, everybody else is kind of just a guy on the video game. So players need to start to ask themselves, okay, is it better to have $500? Maybe I wish I would have had $800, but is it better to have $500 in a video game? Or is it better to risk all of that and potentially have EA just pull the plug on the whole thing? Is it better to have a couple of $100 or a walk-on scholarship program or that $1,000 check or the free Jordans and gear that Built Bar sends you all year long? Or is it better to go to the media and complain in the name of getting a little bit of extra cash or potentially jeopardizing a long-term relationship? I think players are getting some really bad advice across the country. I think whoever it was on the BYU roster that approached the media, I think they got some pretty awful advice as well. I think there's a lot of let's call it what it is. I think there's a lot of snakes out there that are looking to capitalize on players still. Players control their name, image, and likeness, but they're still kids. They're influenced a lot by adults who I think are looking to get their cut of the money, their cut of the publicity, their cut of whatever it is, and they're feeding these players some pretty bad advice. I've seen takes on the internet this week about players being greedy, and maybe that's true to an extent, but I think it's more of a byproduct of players being misguided and ill-informed by their trusted advisors. And from a player perspective, you got to own that, right? You may be 19, 20 years old and a kid and new to all of this, but you're an adult, and that is your responsibility to control your name, image, and likeness. And I think as you do so, I think players will start to find more opportunities as they take risks and do things on their own rather than just listening to some advisor tell them what to do. And that advisor wants to take a cut of the money from somebody else's name, image, and likeness. That's just not the way that it should work. Ultimately, we are seeing some good things from an NIL front that I think BYU players are starting to control their own NIL a little bit more. Jacob Robinson just released his own website. He's going to post his highlights and his stats and things like that, but I'm hoping to see that website iterate. Maybe he puts a blog there there's a $2.99 paywall and he posts practice reports from his point of view there, once or twice a week throughout the year. He'll make money from that. Fans will pay to see that. And that is Jacob Robinson, without the help of anybody else, going out on his own and capitalizing on his name, image, and likeness. If you're a cornerback at BYU, that's what you need to do because your true NIL value, it probably isn't that much. You're probably not going to get that many endorsement deals that will help a local restaurant sell more bowls of soup. But if you can offer something that you can control and tap into the fan market, there's money to be made for sure. So it's cool to see Jacob Robinson do that. I think there's more players who are doing things that are similar, and that's really what name, image, and likeness should be all be about. It's not about salaries and paychecks. That's not how it works. It's about name, image, and likeness. So players need to control that better. They need to pay attention to who they're listening to. And the adults in the room, man, they have got to just stop and grow up because they're giving some awful advice so far. Thank you so much for your support of the show so far. And until next time, give them hell.